Shalom and welcome to Temple Talk from Jerusalem, Israel. Rabbi Chaim Richman here together, Yitzchak Reuven. Today is the 14th day of the month of Shabbat, 5778. It is January the 30th, 2018. And this week, Parshat Yitro, beginning in chapter 18 of the book of Exodus. It is the Torah portion of the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai. But first this, tonight begins the festival, some would call it a minor festival, of Tu B'Shvat, which literally means the 15th day of the month of Shabbat. It is a holiday that is actually not mentioned in the Torah, in the Tanakh itself. It's mentioned in the Talmud. It is mentioned by the great sages of the Mishnah as being an important occasion of the year, because the Mishnah teaches us that the year is actually divided into 4 different sections. There are 4 specific days that could be considered like a type of New Year's, a type of Rosh Hashanah. Of course, we all know that the Rosh Hashanah for people is the first day of the month of Tishrei, which is the anniversary of the creation of man and the day of judgment. But Tu B'Shvat, the 15th day of the month of the Hebrew month of Shvat, is considered to be, called by our sages to be, the new year for trees. And this, actually, in the context of how it's mentioned by our sages, it is a day for reckoning and accounting for various agricultural commandments and obligations in the land of Israel in terms of tithes and aspects of the age of fruit trees. But about 500 years ago or so, give or take, in the holy city of Safed, the Kabbalists delved into the deeper meaning of this day and established it in a different kind of light, and really emphasized in this tradition the joy of the day. And thus, here in the land of Israel, the day has a tremendous amount of significance. It's also a day of planting. But the main aspect in the mystical tradition of this day is no less than a rectification of the eating from the tree of knowledge of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. We partake of God's blessing on this day. We partake of the fruit of the trees of the land of Israel. And we elevate the sparks of holiness that are contained within the natural realm. It's a day of tremendous spiritual rejuvenation, a reacclimation, and we certainly would encourage everyone, whether you live in the land of Israel or outside the land of Israel, on the 15th of Shvat, you should endeavor to eat from the trees, from the fruit of the trees of the land of Israel. And honestly, if you cannot procure any fruit from the land of Israel per se, you should still try and eat from the fruit for which the land of Israel is known and praised, fruits that are native to the land of Israel. And you know what? If you can't do that, you should eat any fruit and make a blessing over it, the proper blessing, in a very robust manner. That blessing, of course, being Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam Borei Peri Ha'etz. We say, blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who creates the fruit of the trees. And you should increase in the amount of fruit that you eat on that day. But if possible, really, at least to eat one species for which the land of Israel is known and praised, such as grapes or olives or figs or pomegranates. And of course, if you eat at least one fruit that has not yet been eaten in that season, that you have not yet eaten that entire season, then you also get to make the blessing of
Shechianu,
which is a very special occasion.
You might have heard Vice President Pence say it last week, and he spoke at the Knesset.
I believe that Leonard Cohen, also of blessed memory, also recited
I also read that
when he was in Tel Aviv.
When Vice President Gore spoke at the Knesset many years ago, he also said the Shechianu.
Sorry, but I don't remember that. Anyway, of course, the blessing of Shechianu, Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam Shechianu V'kiyimanu V'gianu Lazman Hazeh. Blessed are you, Hashem our God, King of the universe, who has granted us life and sustained us and enabled us to reach this occasion. So, honestly, it is actually a very, very special time. And our goal, as always, when we delve into the depths of the calendar and we try to avail ourselves of the blessing and the power of these times and these days, our goal is to serve God. And the best way that we do that is by taking upon ourselves to become better people. And the theme of Tu B'Shvat really is renewal and to give thanks and appreciation for the beauty of this world and for the enjoyment that He gives us in this world through the fruits that He creates for us. It's very deep. And that's all happening now, Tu B'Shvat.
It's all happening at the zoo here in the land of Israel.
You just had to say that. I knew.
I just had to say that.
Maybe we should just explain to some of our listeners that are half our age or more that is the title of a song by Paul Simon and Art Garfunkel.
True.
Two Jewish boys. I think Yitzchak wanted to tie Tu B'Shvat into this week's Torah portion of Yitro. I think he mentioned that to me before we went on mic.
I think I mentioned it as a challenge.
I don't think it's a challenge at all. I think it's really easy.
Yeah, let's hear.
Well, Parshat Yitro is the beginning of all beginnings and the renewal of all renewals, because we stood at Mount Sinai and received the Torah, heard Hashem's voice. I would say as it were, but we really did hear His voice. And I don't mean like on the movie, The Ten Commandments, like hearing God's voice. I mean the real thing. And in fact, one of the themes that I'd like to explore this week in our Torah video lesson, which will be available on YouTube, is the perpetuity of the Sinai experience. Because really the Sinai experience was continued on a daily basis in the Holy Temple. And I think personally that is one of the goals of the experience every day in the Holy Temple. This is Temple Talk, after all. One of the purposes of life in the framework of the Holy Temple is to keep the experience of the Sinai Revelation alive. And of course, the Sinai Revelation is the most incredible human experience that ever took place in recorded history, because God, as it were, made Himself known to the people of Israel, and the whole world was aware of it as well. And that is real news, and we live in a time of fake news. I don't even know what that means anymore, because everybody uses it, like every side uses it against the other side. First of all, let me reiterate, as you and I, Yitzchak, this is important to us, right? Well, this is not a news show. It's not a news show. This is a show where we have these two old friends talking about the Torah and plugging it into their everyday lives, right? That's what we do, basically. That's how other people described it to me. Yeah, they say, oh, I really like Temple Talk, because it's these two old army buddies talking about the Torah. But listen, occasionally we also speak about the news. But because it's our program, we basically choose which news items we want to discuss, and we ignore the others. And there are some that I really wanted to look at also today. But the real news is that...
It's going anywhere, Rabbi?
Yeah, I am, right now.
We're just a bunch of old guys talking.
Wait a minute, I thought I usually interrupt you.
Yeah, well, once in a while.
The real news is when Hashem said, I am Hashem your God who took you out of the land of Egypt. That was the beginning of everything. That was the news.
That is the news. It's not, you see, news in this context, you have to say literally, because it's always news. Like
Right.
you said, if it happened then, it's happening all the time. And as you said, that's what the point, or that is the Holy Temple itself was a daily place for it to continue to happen in man's consciousness. But it is happening all the time. It is news.
Exactly, and as I mentioned, I want to explore that whole concept of how Hashem's voice is still reverberating, and we're still living that experience. But the idea is, everything else really is fake news, I think, in the Torah mindset, because only Hashem is real, and that is the benchmark of everything. So this began a new reality when Israel received the Torah for the purpose of bringing that message to the whole world and of exemplifying how it's possible for a nation to live with God in its midst. Of course, that was actually embodied, as it were, a short time later with the construction of the tabernacle in the desert. Well, Israel actually functioned as like one body with this heart beating in its midst, and that was the tabernacle. And that ever since has been the goal of Israel, to testify to the existence of God and to our covenant with Him and to His plan for all humanity. That's what the Holy Temple is all about. And it's all beginning right now. The program is beginning to take shape. We finished the book of Genesis. We read about the creation. We learned about the cycles of humanity until the time of the forefathers. We learned about the divine service of the forefathers and the ultimate descent into Egypt, redemption from Egypt, and now we are standing at the foot of Mount Sinai. It doesn't get better than this, you might think. Actually, it does, even. But I'm saying we're surrounded by this tendency to manipulate the news and to exploit people's minds, and so much falsehood and so much arrogance. And the only real news, really, is Hashem's voice. Tu B'Shvat is new, and it's all about renewal. It's all about the fact that, and that's why it has such significance for us, because even though we're not trees after all, it is a type of Rosh Hashanah for people as well, because we need to be plugged into our potential for renewal. So 2 days ago was International Holocaust Remembrance Day. It's a big story right now that everybody in Israel has something to say about. Every single outlet, side, person is weighing in on it, and that is this new law that was passed in Poland that makes it a crime to associate the word Poland or Polish with the Holocaust. And Poland is very adamant about that it was not a Polish crime, it was a German crime. And Israel is very, 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 very angry about that. And Poland, I'm just following these stories, Poland made it very clear that Israel can be angry, but no statement made by Israel is going to affect this law. A lot of people are very upset because the Nazi death camps, at least 90% of them, were erected in Poland. Polish Jewry was decimated. All but a very, very small amount of Jews were all destroyed in the Nazi death machines that were erected in Poland. And that's true. They were German concentration camps that were erected on Polish soil, but everybody knows, and I mean everybody, and especially Jews, and especially Jewish families, and especially Jewish families who lost loved ones in the Holocaust, and especially Jewish families who had relatives in Poland, like my wife's family. Everybody knows that in order to execute an operation as vast, as far-flung, as incredibly massive as the destruction of Eastern European Jewry, it took a lot of cooperation and complicity, and everybody knows, and the survivors testify to this, and it's everywhere that anyone of any intelligence cares to examine and read and speak about. Polish citizenry, by and large, more than aided and abetted the destruction of their Jewish neighbors. And I'm not saying that there weren't any that there wasn't any resistance. I'm not saying that there weren't some isolated Polish heroes, righteous amongst the nations, who tried very hard to save Jews. But the stories of the complicity, the zeal, the enthusiasm of Poles sometimes actually outweigh that of the Nazis themselves. The horrors committed by ordinary Polish citizens against their Jewish neighbors. So to deny that is really, really fake news and a real lie. And that's why people in Israel are so upset about it. I mean, I even read when the one news item was discussing, well, if an Israeli guide brings a group of Jewish youth to the concentration camps in Poland and is explaining what happened there, they could be arrested because they might say that there was Polish complicity in this.
Yeah. It seems like a pretty poor statement that
the reason that it's so
Polish
important, the
government
reason I'm mentioning it,
take.
the reason that it is an issue at all is because as the years go by and as the generations wax and wane, there aren't a lot of survivors left. And there's more and more hatred in the world, and there's more and more anti-Semitism in the world, and there are more and more audacious denials of the history of the Holocaust. And so to allow Poland to get away with this and to rewrite its history in a way that makes it more comfortable with itself and in a way that it finds more in line with what it would like to be, is a real desecration of the memory of all the Jews who were put to death, millions, in Poland by the Nazis with the gleeful aid of Poles.
Not to mention the massacre of Jews which took place in Poland after the war had ended. There was an incident in which an entire town was wiped out by their neighbors.
When the Jews were returning from the
Right,
camps
right.
to their homes.
And
Right.
this was post-World War II. The war
Right.
was over. The German army was defeated, but the Polish population of that town were still lusting for blood and treasure. As a former president of the United States used to like to use that expression, blood and treasure.
So that would be a very serious example of revisionist history. And it would be fake news to say, this just in from the newsroom, big headlines, Poland, nothing to do with the Holocaust. It's absolutely not true.
It's a bit of a strain.
He said on the background of this week's Torah portion of Yitro, where Israel received the Ten Commandments and the Torah at Mount Sinai and began to be responsible for shining that light into the world. And that's called Mount Sinai. And the Hebrew word phonetically is related, sounds like the word sin'ah, which means hatred. And a play on words, tongue-in-cheek, quixotic comment that our sages make is that the name Mount Sinai is called such whimsically because from there hatred came into the world, meaning that the nations of the world hate Israel for receiving the Torah and for what they represent and for what they took upon themselves to do. I'll just move very, very seamlessly and smoothly to the fact that in the world of news, of course, this is not a news show,
Nope.
but we talk about what we want to, after all.
We're all friends.
You know how in the last hours of the Obama presidency, the United States released $221 million to the Palestinians against the legislation of the GOP. And you know how President Obama, who recently spoke in a synagogue and said that he emphasized again that he's done more for Israel than any president. By the way, his standing joke apparently was that he considered himself to be a liberal Jew. He calls himself a liberal Jew. He explained the veto that he had made against Israel in the UN that he had not blocked because of the, quote, skyrocketing settlement activity, which will preclude the possibility of any Palestinian state.
Yes.
He doesn't like the Jews very much. He doesn't like the Jews very much, no matter what he says. He hates Israel. He hated Israel. His administration continues to hate Israel. So another news item this week was the discovery, the revelation of a photograph that was taken in 2005 of President Obama, who was then a congressman from Illinois, with his bosom buddy, Louis Farrakhan, the well-known hater from the Nation of Islam. After Obama had denied that he received support from him, or that that he did not seek his endorsement. It turns out that the photographer who took this picture of them standing together had been told to conceal it. But now a book is coming out, and so he's admitting that he did take the picture, they were very close, and he was told that it wouldn't be in the interest of Obama's run for president to circulate that picture. I say all this because what I'm really thinking about is not so much Obama, who is destined to reap his reward, but
Yeah.
I'm having a hard time getting this out.
Yes.
But you remember Lurch?
Yes.
Who do I mean by Lurch?
Yeah, Lurch from the Addams Family.
I mean Secretary of State John Kerry.
Oh, that
Unbelievable story. Unbelievable story that came out last week that I just cannot I believe is that apparently John Kerry kept up his pen pal relationship, his backdoor good relationship with Abbas of the PLO, aka the president of the Palestinian Authority, and through his contacts, John Kerry reportedly, maintaining these contacts with PA Chief Mahmoud Abbas, urged him to, quote, stay strong and just wait it out and ignore everything that Trump has done, because John Kerry hopes to be president in 2020. John Kerry also told Mahmoud Abbas that he should play for time because apparently he said President Trump is not going to last a year. So he should just stay strong, play for time, and then he'll see to it that everything will be undone as far as everything that Trump has done for Israel. Mm-hmm. So, I don't know, that sounds quite treasonous to me. It sounds like something, I mean, considering everything that's been going on with the FBI, etc., it certainly sounds like something that should be considered to be undermining the authority of the president and the American government. But there you have it.
There you have it. What can I tell you? Man's a Democrat.
Kerry urged Abbas to reject President Donald Trump's, and I quote, demands. There's the music, which is very good, because I'm about to have apoplexy here. So, yeah, John Kerry, he just won't go away. Him and his haircut. He just, what can I tell you? I said long ago that Osem ketchup is much better than Heinz ketchup anyway.
Definitely.
And,
I don't even call it, can't even call it Heinz ketchup.
No, it's
against the
flavor
law.
content.
It's against
That's
the law.
Stay with us. We'll be right back. We'll explain everything. Temple Talk.
Shalom and welcome back to Temple Talk. This is Yitzchak Reuven with Rabbi Chaim Richman here in the studio in Jerusalem, Israel. Today is the 14th day of the month of Shvat 5778, the 30th of January 2018. This week's parasha is Yitro, and that's what I really want to talk about. But we got some splaining to do because we left you with a cliffhanger of a bombshell about the Heinz ketchup thing. Here's a little background for those who didn't have a chance yet to Google it all and get dirty on it. I believe that Kerry's wife is the heir to the Heinz ketchup empire.
Exactly.
57 flavors? 57 varieties. And
we really, really, really don't like John Kerry or anything that he stands for. And so therefore we say...
No, it happened to be unrelated to that, a fact that here in Israel a couple of years ago, a law was passed which determined how many tomatoes had to be...
How much tomato content has to be in catsup in order for it to be labeled?
Catsup? Ketchup. No, who calls it catsup, Rabbi? What era are you
Isn't that
from?
a side point?
Ketchup. Let's
It was
stick
a bold
with ketchup.
a bold law. It was a law to be kept, and it was a law that would become a foundation of society.
And guess which brand name didn't make the grade because it was too diluted. Didn't have enough
Heinz.
tomatoes. Yeah, Heinz. Get it?
Heinz ketchup. It was decided by the Knesset in a bold leadership move that it must be labeled as a ketchup-flavored condiment. Osem, however, the Israeli brand, every bottle boasts a full 18 tomatoes. And besides that, Heinz ketchup is really too sweet.
I always wonder how they fit 18
It's too sweet,
tomatoes
and
in
it's
that
a
little bitty
deceptive
thing.
kind of sweet. It's a false veneer of sweetness, but it's really
And it has
not good
big
for
hair,
you.
big hair.
All right, so we
All
did
right.
that.
Okay. So this week's
I just
Parsha,
can't
Yitro.
believe that the man actually thinks that he could get away with that, like telling a boss, don't worry, just sit this out, stay strong. In other words, I'll undo everything. We'll take care of it. Stay strong? What do you mean stay strong? Stay strong and what? In continuing acts of terror and murder against the Jews? Unbelievable.
Well, quite frankly, that is one of the reasons why Israel is so pleased to hear that the United States intends to move the embassy to Jerusalem within the next year, or by the end of 2018, I think, so that a future president can't undo this recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital and the moving of the embassy to Jerusalem. This week's Parasha, Yitro, has 4 parts to it. Very interesting parasha, not to mention the fact that it is, as you said, it's a whole universe game changer. So it opens up with Yitro, the father-in-law of Moses, appearing on the scene with Moshe's wife, Tzipporah, and their 2 children. And he sort of introduces himself like, I'm Moshe's father-in-law. And they call Moshe and he and Aaron, and after a very emotional meeting and greeting, he and Aaron and the elders all get together and have a meal and make offerings to Hashem. Very, very beautiful, very poignant. And then Yitro sees that Moshe is sitting from day to night, and as people are coming to him to be their judge, all sorts of matters, great and small. And he says to Moses, this is not going to do. You're going to get worn out, and the people are going to get impatient, waiting all day long for a matter. So he basically taught Moshe how to set up a judiciary with judges and different courts will handle different cases, and the toughest cases, of course, will make their way to Moshe himself. So he's a very important and revolutionary figure himself. Of course, not only did he invite Moshe into his house when he first met him, and not only were his sheep that Moshe was tending to when God appeared to Moshe at the burning bush, but now he's back. And yes?
But there's other reasons why he's such an important figure.
Yes, he's also a very important figure because he was an
idolatrous priest.
An idolatrous priest who had knowledge of all the idolatrous practices of the world, and he was seemed to be on a search for truth. He was looking for the true God, and when he met Moses, and Moses told him what had happened, what had transpired since they had last met, the 10 plagues and the exodus from Egypt, the crossing of the sea, and he was elated and delighted.
He was so moved that he decided then and there that he would abandon all of his dilettantish exploration of various idolatrous rites and cults, and he embraced Hashem, the God of Israel, and he embraced the Torah.
And all this happened before we even get to the Ma'amad Har Sinai, as it's called in Hebrew, the giving of the Torah at Har Sinai, at Mount Sinai. This incredible
that according
human being.
to our sages' tradition, he was actually one of the original advisors of Pharaoh.
Right.
In the council that they had
at the beginning of the book of Exodus, when Pharaoh says, this people is growing too numerous for us, what can we do?
Let us deal wisely with them. So there were how many advisors were there? There
3.
was Job. There was Bilam. And there was Yitro. Job, when the idea was raised about killing all the Jews, Job remained silent.
Mm-hmm.
Bilam, it was his idea, really.
Right.
He put it forward. And Yitro, he split. He fled.
He said, I can't have anything to do with this. And of course, Job would pay for his silence, as we know the story of Job. And Bilam wasn't finished with the Israelites. He was still ready to get him first chance he would get. But
like Kerry.
And then like Kerry. And then Yitro goes back on his way. Correct? And then second part of this week's parsha is the preparation for the giving of the commandments. The people need to be pure. They need to keep a distance from the mountain, etc., etc. And then, of course, we come to the 10 Commandments themselves, and of course, all the
experience,
pyrotechnics that surrounded it, the lightning and the thunder and the smoke and the fire,
ability to
and
hear
the
for
shofarot.
Hashem to say more than one word at once, and for the people of Israel to experience this whole incredible brush with the divine, this whole new upgraded perception of reality, for them to experience that with on an extrasensorial level, and that the senses were no longer limited to their particular departments, which we, of course, refer to year after year as its word, as it's known, synesthesia, which means a blending of the senses. And, of course, that's what the verse tells us when it says that all the people saw the thunder, because sight was no longer limited to seeing, and hearing was no longer limited to hearing, but rather the comprehensive reality of Hashem's truth was able to be perceived on every level of the soul at once.
And then, after the conclusion of the 10 Commandments, the Parshat Yitro closes with an 11th commandment, which is, build for me an altar of earth, which I'm always stunned and just taken by the beauty of that, of the juxtaposition of these 10 commandments coming straight from heaven, straight from the mouth of God, as it were, and then this almost seems like a humble commandment to build an altar as an expression of man's love for God. But the one thing that just totally blows me away about this parsha, Rabbi, is that it is so human and it's so divine. You know, you have these human beings, you have Yitro, you have Moshe, and then at the end you have this gesture from God to build me an altar. You know, you build it, you build it, and it's beckoning towards our humanity, and at the same time there's this experience which is bigger than anything, bigger than life itself, which is the 10 Commandments and all that surrounded it and transpired, and
the entire Torah was given. You know, the 10 Commandments is the framework of everything. But we want to take this opportunity to remind listeners that might be less familiar with the tradition that the whole Torah was given over during this period of time. That's why Moshe was on Mount Sinai for 40 days and 40 nights, and the whole phenomena, I'll call it, even though it's not really a phenomenon, but it's perceived as such, the manifestation of the oral Torah together with the written Torah, which is the foundation of the Torah itself, is so important to understand, because the Torah itself, the written Torah, is like a shorthand, like notes that were taken in a university class. Because the exposition, the explanation of how every single commandment is to be fulfilled and how the Torah can be understood in every context is what was given over orally to Moshe while he was on Mount Sinai. And that is the living Torah. It's passed down in every generation, still called the oral tradition, even though it's all been committed to writing. And so the experience was very, very comprehensive and touched upon every aspect of life. And when we talk about the giving of the Torah at the Sinai Revelation, when God introduced himself to the Jewish people, it was the whole covenant of our relationship with God based on all the 613 commandments. Some of them were given at Marah, as we said last week before the Torah was given. Some of them were clarified in different times and in different places, like in the book of Deuteronomy. But the whole process began at Mount Sinai.
And what I think I'm trying to say by what I said before about this combination of the human element and the divine is that the giving of the Torah is bookended by Yitro and by building an altar. And it's almost as if to tell us that as grand and cosmic as the giving of the Torah is, it belongs to man, and it is our possession. It's our responsibility to care for it and to live it, not just simply to, wow, whoa, that was a great time, let's, we'll never get there again. No, but to really live it. And then again, what you said before about the Holy Temple itself was the re-experiencing of that occasion, that moment in time.
There's no way to minimize the significance of this event. I mean, that in itself, it sounds almost silly to describe it as an event. That the giving of the Torah, the Sinai Revelation, Matan Torah, at Mount Sinai is the building block of everything, because it is the proof, as it were, of God's love for man. It is the rendezvous of humanity with the everlasting. And the whole idea is that the Torah was given to man, is that it's so man-centered. And this is the famous midrash that I am so fond of how the sages quip that the angels in heaven were resentful that God was giving the Torah
furious.
to man. Didn't want God's honor to be, besmirched by giving the Torah to lowly man. And when Moses ascended to Mount Sinai and, as it were, passed into this heavenly sphere to receive it, they wanted to boot him out. They wanted to cast him down. And Moses was fearful, and God told Moses to face them down and to answer them himself, and because they were saying, "Why are you giving the Torah to man?" And Moses said to the angels, "Well, it says in the Torah, honor your father and your mother. Do you have father and mother?" It says in the Torah all sorts of aspects of our physicality and our control over our physicality and our very humanity. And the angels, of course, were not able to answer him, and God said, "Moses, you spoke well." But the bottom line of what the teaching is emphasizing is that the Torah is for man, and that is God's glory, and that is God's delight, as it were, that while he could have kept it in the heavenly spheres, his desire is that he has a place down here, he has representation down here, that we care to live according to his word and to be a function of our belief in him. And that's, of course, the whole idea of the Holy Temple, is as it were, he doesn't need a place down here. The heavens and the heavens, as Solomon said, cannot possibly contain it. But the idea is to make a place for God in this world, not only in the realm of physical space, which is in the Holy Temple, but in our lives. And that's how we conduct ourselves. And that's why this whole thing here, as opposed to fake news, this is the only real news. The only real thing is that here there's a nation, Israel, that came out of Egyptian bondage, that has a very fresh and vital and new message for the whole world, which is that it's possible to live a life dedicated to God. That's what this is all about. And that's why everything is coming against us since then, because we are seen as a threat to the despotic nature of the human condition.
And that's why in Exodus 25:8, God says, "And they shall build for me a sanctuary, that I shall dwell amongst them." That there's a physical sanctuary for God's presence, but God will dwell amongst us. There's like a two-part commandment here. One is that we make ourselves suitable to be God's neighbors, for God to dwell amongst us by fulfilling the words of his Torah, fulfilling the commandments. And of course, that the other side of that is to actually build the mikdash, the sanctuary that God is desiring. And that's what makes us relevant today. That's what makes the state of Israel relevant today. That's what makes Trump's recognition of Jerusalem as our capital relevant today. That's what makes going up to the Temple Mount relevant today, because
That's
it's all
what makes
part of
Kerry's
that.
attempt to undermine everything that Trump has done relevant today.
He's a Bilam. He won't give up.
He's such a
Won't give up until the final something's over, until the final curtain falls. But yeah, it all begins here on Mount Sinai. It all begins here. This reason for our being, this relevance that we, the nation of Israel, have in the world and for humanity. It's a good start.
Yitzchak, I want to talk about the conference that the Temple Institute is hosting, of course, in the Hebrew language, in honor of Tu B'Shvat.
Yes. What would you like to say about it, Rabbi?
I wanted you to read for us the poster that we posted about
give me
the
a
schedule.
moment here. The conference, which will be taking place tomorrow on Tu B'Shvat, in the afternoon, 5 o'clock it begins, at the Temple Institute's
Jerusalem headquarters.
And
really, the conference really emphasizes the connection between the themes of Tu B'Shvat and the Holy Temple.
Right, and the subjects which will be discussed and presented are the importance of the Seder Taharot, which is translated, I guess, as Order of Purity, which is a section of the Mishnah, and the importance of it and its relevance to the Holy Temple, which will be presented by Rabbi Yisra Ariel, founder of the Temple Institute. Another subject will be, which is entitled Steps Toward the Holy Temple. It's presented by Rabbi Azariah Ariel, Dean of the Beit HaBechira Kollel of the Temple Institute. And another topic, which will be presented by Professor Hillel Weiss, which is, the title of the topic is actually a quote from Deuteronomy 18:4, your grain, your wine, and your oil, of course, referring to earlier, the agricultural commandments which pertain to those produce. And finally, there will be a presentation, producing wine, oil, and bread in purity, referring to today and making preparations to prepare these things for use in the Holy Temple.
It was basically a symposium on the agriculture of the land of Israel in the context of the actuality of the Holy Temple.
What many people may not be aware of is that there are a lot of agricultural commandments that pertain to the land of Israel, and they are followed today. Any agricultural product grown here in the land of Israel and or livestock which is raised in the land of Israel is subject to these commandments and is dealt with accordingly, even before it reaches the markets where we purchase it. Like I said, it's easy to be unaware of it because it's out of sight, but it's extremely important, and it is attended to.
And it's a beautiful application of the relevance of the commandments of the Torah in Israel today. Yitzchak, we also have some beautiful new photographs that we just posted on the Temple Institute's Facebook page.
That is true, Rabbi. We have a new vessel in the Temple Institute.
It's just been unveiled. It's just been completed.
Unveiled, and it is a golden flask. It is the flask that is used for the Simchat Beit HaShoeva, for the water libation ceremony, which took place during each of the intermediate days of
Sukkot.
Right. And
which has been reenacted in recent years, every year.
And it's with this vessel that the Kohanim, the temple priests, who would go down into the city of David, to the Shiloach spring, where they would dip this flask into the water to bring up these pure waters, which then they would carry with great pomp and ceremony and celebration and festivity back up to the Temple Mountain, back up to the Temple Courtyard, where this water, along with a flask of pure wine, would be simultaneously poured through another vessel, another two vessels.
On the corner of the altar.
On the corner of the altar, where it would then run down. It would run down the side of the altar, and this was part of a ceremony which was basically recognizing God's blessings, I believe.
So we have a little taste of Sukkot here in the middle of the month of Shvat.
And it's a very beautiful vessel, and it can be seen at the Temple Institute, and it can be seen on our Facebook page at this very moment. So, again, we wish everybody a very, very happy and joy-filled Tu B'Shvat. Fruit-filled. And
Fruit of the land of Israel filled.
Eat those fruits and make those blessings, and thanks for being with us. Temple Talk.